When disaster strikes, having reliable emergency cooking options can make all the difference in the world for your survival. Sure, you can open a can of beans or a box of crackers, but to get the nutrients your body needs and to keep your family healthy and happy, you're going to have options to prepare full meals. First aid supplies are a necessity, but there are times when you're not going to need them. A bug out bag is important, but only in certain situations. Food and water is something we need every single day, regardless if everything is going along normally or it's a localized emergency or disaster, or we're talking about a full-scale SHTF scenario. And having the food is step one. Having the ability to cook and prepare a wide range of meals is step two. So today I'll cover some of these emergency or SHTF cooking options that you could use in these situations depending on your needs. By the end, you'll have a better understanding of how to keep your family fed, nourished, and happy when traditional cooking methods are unavailable. Now, keep in mind as we go through this list, some of these are outdoor options and some are indoor options when cooking outside might be a little bit dangerous. It may just be that there's cold weather outside, or it may be that you don't want to alert the neighborhood when you're cooking a meal, ringing the dinner bell, so to speak. Now let's go ahead and get into the first one here, and this is wood fires. This is one of the outdoor methods, and there are a number of different things you can use. There's rocket stoves, there's fire pits. You could put, a chicken on a rotisserie, something like that. You've got Dutch ovens that would work outdoors. And the good thing about fires is if you run out of fuel, say you run out of gasoline or propane, the odds are you'll be able to find some firewood from one place or another, whether that's cutting down trees around your area, abandoned buildings, and I suppose worst case scenario, taking apart the deck or something like that. But you will be able to find firewood. The longer things go on, and if you run out of fuel, that firewood could become a really good option. Again, this is going to ring the dinner bell. This is going to give off the smoke and the smell. Even if you're not cooking anything, you can always smell a campfire. And if you are cooking something, the neighbors, if they don't have any food, may be coming and knocking on your door. The next one I have is a fireplace, sort of the same type of situation, but inside. Now, a fireplace is going to be a little bit more difficult to cook on because you're limited in how much space that you have. But you could do coal cooking, which is basically letting that fire burn down and putting a Dutch oven or a pan in there on top of those coals. So not a raging fire or anything like that, but you can boil water. You can heat up cans of soup or beans or meals. You can use the Dutch oven. You could even use just a regular pan, as long as it's all metal, to cook in a fireplace. And if you have a wood burning oven, that would be even better because you've got the top of that oven that can heat up meals. We have a wood burning fireplace, but the top of the fireplace there's not a lot of room and it doesn't get really hot. But some of those pot-bellied stoves would actually be perfect for a situation like this. That may be kind of an investment to put one of those in your home if you don't already have it, but they absolutely would be wonderful in any sort of disaster or SHTF situation where you're trying to cook meals without any electricity or gas or anything like that. The next option I have, and this is a large one, but this is generators and putting in a transfer switch in your home. A transfer switch is basically a switch that turns the breaker off from the electricity from the grid and on to the electricity that you generate from a generator. You don't have to power your whole home. You can set these up to maybe power one or two breakers, which would turn on the power to your kitchen. So you could run a refrigerator. If you have an electric stove, you could run that. That would give you a lot of different options as far as cooking in a disaster situation. Again, when you're talking about alerting the neighbors, those generators give off quite a bit of sound. They do have inverter generators like the one I have. It's a Predator generator that gives off very little sound profile. And in an emergency situation where I was worried about that, there are options to lessen that as well, encase that and soundproof that. But a generator, this is I suppose the best option, but also not a very feasible option for a lot of people. But if you want to ensure that you're not going to be interrupted by a power outage or something similar, having a transfer switch on your breaker panel is definitely the way to go. And that's something I am looking into. It's a little bit expensive at this point. And another option, if you're looking to go electric, is solar power stations. These power stations range in size from a couple hundred watts to up to kilowatts. And while using a hot plate or something like that it takes a lot of energy. If you're only doing it for 15 minutes a day, and this is the best option or the option you choose to go with, it can be done. Just know that with these power stations and that limited supply of battery power that you have, you're not going to be able to use it much for anything else because this takes quite a bit of power. A hot plate takes about 600 watts. That is basically, for some of these power stations, about an hour, 2 hours worth of use before it's gone. Now, if you're using this one time a day and you're able to recharge that, not a big deal. But if you're also using it for other things, you're going to have to calculate those and weigh the pros and cons of that. But solar power stations can be used with the hot plate, like I mentioned. You've got the Instant Pot, which is fantastic because it only takes about 15 minutes of energy to cook something, and then it builds up steam and it releases that steam and for another 15 minutes. So it's a really quick and convenient way to do it. You are using quite a bit of energy in that 15 minutes, but it makes fantastic meals. Also, coffee makers and things like that. I think everyone should have a coffee percolator, but if you have that power bank, you can run your coffee maker in the mornings, have your coffee for the day, and refill that energy. Again, it's a limited supply, so you've got to calculate how much you're going to need and how much you have available. Now, number 5 here is an indoor option, and these are alcohol stoves. And this is sort of not the most convenient for cooking large meals, but in an emergency, these are absolutely fantastic. An alcohol stove can be run on a few different fuels. I just did a video recently about these and the different types of fuel you can use: Everclear, denatured alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, a lot of different things. These are fantastic because you just put a couple ounces of the fuel in the stoves and they burn for about 20 minutes. Now, you can't refill these while they're burning or right after they burn, so I'd suggest getting a couple of these. That way you can switch them out. But if you need to just boil a little bit of water, say you've got some freeze-dried food, you can do that with one of these really easily. If you need to heat up a can of beans or SpaghettiOs or something like that, these alcohol stoves work fantastic. They're small, they're lightweight, and a bunch of different fuels that you can use. And for around $15 or so, these are sort of a why not option to have. And you can even make your own DIY alcohol stoves. Next, I've got outdoor propane grills, and these are something that most of us already have, even charcoal grills. These come in different sizes and different types. Some of them have the burners on the side, which are great because you can cook outdoors, boil water, make soup, and not give off a lot of smell. But when you are cooking on that grill, your neighbors are going to know it. Another thing that goes along with these grills is you've got the fuel canisters. I believe they're 20-pound canisters. Make sure and get 1 or 2 backups as well, because in any sort of emergency, you're not going to be really sure how long something is going to last. And while these do last a fairly long time, if you're using them every day and maybe a couple times a day, you're going to go through that fairly quickly. So make sure you have a couple backups to those. And then kind of along the same lines, but just a smaller version, are the camp stoves, the propane camp stoves like the Coleman's and things like that. Those are also good options. They do have, like the one I have is a Coleman, and it's got 2 burners on it. You can do quite a bit with that little stove. I haven't tried it myself, but I've heard that even if you needed to cook indoors, as long as you had ventilation in the house, you could do that. I would be very leery about that. There are options for cooking indoors. You've got the Iwatani stove, but with the propane, I would just kind of keep everything that runs on propane outside. In an emergency, no other choice situation, sure, maybe open the windows or maybe just cook something really quick. But for indoors, a butane stove is absolutely fantastic. I've got the Iwatani and I've got a gas 1 stove, and both of those I've tested out indoors. We use the Iwatani all the time for cooking indoors, whether it's s'mores or we have family gatherings, fondues, things like that. But these are absolutely fantastic and are perfectly safe indoors during a disaster or an emergency. It's a single burner, but as long as you get enough fuel, you'll be able to cook meals for, weeks, and depending on how much you have, even months. So outdoors, you've got the propane camp stove, and then indoors, you've got the butane stoves that are rated for indoor use. And another one that could be used for indoors is the sterno fuels. Now, this is not the most cost-effective method. It will work. It takes a while for you to heat up or to boil water with one sterno can. You probably need a couple. But there are different types. You've got the really cheap sternos on Amazon, and then you've got the extra hot sternos. And the extra hot actually are extra hot. They are more expensive, but the little cheap ones aren't going to get as hot. So it sort of balances out as far as how much you spend and how much output you're getting from each of those. So sterno would be an option. I wouldn't depend on it for boiling water or anything like that. But if you had a can of soup or something you just needed to warm up, sterno would absolutely get the job done. I don't go out and stockpile a bunch of sterno, but I do have a lot laying around because I use it for family gatherings and things like that. And if I did need to use that, I would use the foldable camp stove that I have, and I can heat up a can of beans or warm up some water, things like that. And then the final one I have here is actually my favorite one, and that is solar ovens. The All-American Sun Oven is the best solar oven on the market. There are a few different kinds, but as far as efficiency, nothing is going to beat an All-American Sun Oven. And I'm not trying to sell sun ovens or anything like that, but I've had mine for over 10 years now, and I use it all the time. It's fun for the family. It's entertaining. It's something different. And in an emergency situation, it is one of those tools that you can use outdoors, and it's not going to give off any smell whatsoever. You can put it in the backyard and the animals aren't going to mess with it. The neighbors aren't going to know you have it unless they can see it, and you can cook just about anything in there. I've made bread, I've made pot roast, I have hard-boiled eggs. I mean, just so many different things you can do in an All-American Sun Oven that it's one of those that it does cost a little bit of money, but it's something that you're going to be glad that you spent that money on if you do end up getting one of these, because they are just fantastic. And the only fuel that it takes is fuel from the sun. So when that sterno runs out, when that propane runs out, when all of your fuel runs out, or you don't feel like going and chopping down a tree, that All-American Sun Oven, as long as you've got sun, you're good to go. So having a few of these cooking options is great, but having the food to cook in the first place is more important. I've done quite a few videos about food storage, but this video right here will give you a good idea about what sort of foods to include in your food storage to ensure that you have all your bases covered. Just because it's a disaster doesn't mean that your dinner or your meals need to be a disaster. With that, take care and prepare, everyone. We will talk to you all later.